So today we'll continue on wherever we left last time. So we are talking about interfacing keyboard using a serial interface, right? In particular, we are using the PS2 interface for data communication, and uh, we just looked at the protocol structure for some time, and then we did not go much into the implementation details. Right? It was a little bit hastily done, so I want to repeat that today anyway. So after that, we are also going to look at other interfacing technologies. In particular, we will look at the SPI technology, right? The serial peripheral interface, which is pretty commonly used for interfacing digital sensors, right? So far we have looked at how to interface analog sensors using ADC, and looked at different features that are available in microcontrollers in order to program such ADCs to improve the resolution, to improve the sampling speed, and so on. And now we are slowly looking into other types of sensors that already has a digital interface, and what kind of protocols goes in into it while exchanging data in between the microcontroller and the sensors. So back to the pin change interrupt, right? Last class we were discussing interrupts in some details, and we finished off ADC, and we were trying to discuss how to make the ADC driver more and more efficient, and then we took a little detour and gave you an introduction to interrupts, right? How are interrupts handled using the interrupt service routines and so on. And in specifically, we looked at one kind of interrupt. We started discussing about this PCINT, this pin change interrupt. So whenever there is a certain fluctuation, right? Let's say you have a button that is attached to a certain pin, and your PCINT interrupt is activated for that pin. We are trying to capture any key press or any fluctuation in the signal that is coming to that particular pin. Okay, and as you saw, right, or you can see right now that many of these pins, right, we have so many PCINT interrupts that can be activated for the entire chip, right, from PCINT 1 or this is PCINT 0 all the way till PCINT 23. We have so many pin change interrupts that could be activated. But of course, you cannot take all of them simultaneously, because there are other functionalities of the other pins also, right? So if you are using an ADC, some of those pins will be blocked, or if you are using UART, like you are trying to receive or transmit serial data, right? So there are other functionalities of other pins, but many of the pins that are in this Atmega 328 do give you this facility for this PCINT. Okay, and there were other things that we also discussed, a little variation of this PCINT, where we can also trigger the interrupt based on what kind of change it was happening on the pin, whether it was a rising edge or a falling edge or just a change and so on. So the external interrupts was something that we also discussed, and there were only 2 pins for doing that, right? And one more additional thing, if you remember, was that the PCINT, this interrupts were grouped in terms of ports, right? Every port, uh, right? We had ports B, C, and D, right? And there are a collection of pins within all these ports, right? This is port number B, and port number B will have some pins, right? Port number C will have some pins, as shown in the picture on the right hand side. They will have some pins, right? So the difference with the external interrupt was that we can specifically or explicitly try to implement the interrupt service routine for those 2 external interrupts, whereas if you are using PCINT, the interrupt service vector will be specific to a particular port, and within that particular port you have to basically jump in the interrupt service routine meant for that port, and then try to check that which pin was pressed, and if you want to do further processing on them, you have to do it there. But it will be shared among different pins within the same port, so you have to keep that thing in mind. So you do not have 23 different interrupt service or 24 different interrupt service routines for this 24 PCINTs, right? So just keep this thing in mind. And if you want to really have 3 different ISRs, you can always choose the pins from different ports, so that at least for your application, if you are just using only uh, 3 interrupts, you can always share that across 3 different ports. But I also mentioned that you might even have very small, this tiny microcontrollers, that 80 tiny 85 or something that I was mentioning, which will just have only one IO port, right? So there could be situations where you just want to shrink your project as much as possible, right? The bare minimum you need for your project. So if you just happen to need 3 IO pins, you won't be using something like an Atmega 328, right, which has a lot of general purpose input outputs, right? So you anyway have to deal with those situations where your interrupt service routines might be shared across multiple pins. So keep this thing in mind. Okay, and then we started with this case study, and we did not go quite into the implementation. So the demo that I was trying to show you was something which was using this PCINT interrupt and trying to send data from the keyboard to the microcontroller. So we were using a regular keyboard which was connected by the PS2 interface. We are going to discuss what this PS2 interface is one more time and how the code was implemented. So before that, I'll try to repeat the demo that I showed you last class. So here I have the regular keyboard with the PS2 interface, if you can see on the top, and which is connected to this Arduino, right? And we have connected a serial port just to look at the output, right? So that this data is transferred to the laptop, and we can see what the data is, right? So I'll just trying to do some key presses, and these were scanned in the code, like how do you detect all these key presses and how it is scanned and converted to the proper ASCII code and printed out, right? So that converting to the ASCII code and printing those out, that is like kind of a table lookup, as you will understand. There are many codes that are responsible for every key press. If you press A, there is a certain scan code, it is called, which is generated, and we need to map the scan code to a particular character, in this case A or Q or A, B, C, D, whatever, right? And even for the function keys and all the other buttons, right, they will send scan codes, right? And those for a regular computer or an OS will understand how to interpret them, right? So for if you are trying to directly interact with, let's say in this case, we are just receiving the key presses in the Arduino, but we might not have any function for like the function keys or escape or caps lock and so on, right? We might not need that much functionality, but this is just trying to show you, right, what can be done or how it is done, right? So just to give a quick background on the I have already spoken about this last time, but repeating this. So this is a particular kind of interface that we were using for connecting the keyboard to the microcontroller. So we are basically using 4 pins, and out of those, 2 were using for the two were being used for the data transfer. Number 1, so this pin was being used for pumping the data out through from the keyboard to the microcontroller, and then there was a associated clock, right? Because you need to do some kind of a synchronization in between the microcontroller and the keyboard. So this is a digital bus, and we need to have some kind of an among these 2 devices, how they send the data, at what speed they will send the data, right? When they will stop, when they will start resending the data again, always in trying to integrate or trying to interface digital components, right? Let's say a digital sensor with a microcontroller, or even let's say 2 microcontrollers want to talk to each other. So they have to have a predefined set of rules, which is called a protocol, right? And all these devices need to follow this protocol in order to, so that like everything which has has been standardized to follow the protocol could participate in the network, right? So apart from these two pins, we are using the VCC, which is 5 volts. In this case, it will be supplied from our Arduino board and the ground pin, right? And it's a very simple interface. And the intention to show you this example is how the PCINT that interrupt could be used, and to do a very simple serial data transfer. And basically, we are trying to write a driver for this, right, in the microcontroller, which could be very easy, although it might look very daunting in the beginning, that how do you handle this kind of devices, right, which is not a standard sensor, right? It's just a lot of keys that are there, right, and you need to kind of interpret the keystroke. So this is just going to give you some more background on how do you decipher or interpret a particular protocol and then try to adapt it to your system. Okay, so sensors will not use definitely a PS2 port, right? But this is again for your clarification on the PCINT. So in this particular protocol, this is called bidirectional. So you can send data from the microcontroller to the device, or the keyboard in this case, or from the device to the microcontroller, as is mostly done. Okay, so in this particular scenario, the device will generate the clock signal. Okay, so in this case, it is the keyboard which is going to generate the clock signal whenever there is a keystroke, of course, as I'll show you. And all the data is transmitted 1 byte at a time, and each byte is sent in a frame consisting of 11 bits. So the data part, so the characters that are representing the key, that will be 1 byte long, and then the entire frame will be 11 bits, right? So there are 3 additional you can say control bits for the protocol. So any protocol that you will have in any of these computer based systems, right, they will always have some kind of an overhead, right? Even if the data is like, let's say, k bits or k bytes, you'll always have some more bits to orchestrate the entire system, and our idea is to minimize that. Okay, so always you will find that apart from the actual data, there will be some synchronization bits, start bits, stop bits, there will be some error correction bits, and so on. For our purpose, for this communication, if you look up a manual for any of these PS2 standard keyboards, you will see that for any key press, you will basically have this series of 11 bits that will start with the start bit, which is 0. This is the first bit that will be sent in the data bus. Then there will be consecutively sent 8 bits, which is going to represent your character, the character that you are pressing. Okay, and then you will have a parity bit. This is, you can say, mostly for error correction. So if the total number of bits happen to be even, so the parity bit will be 1, so that you have odd parity, right? You might even have even parity, but in this case, for the keyboard protocol, the odd parity is adopted. And then after that, you will have a stop bit saying that your data transfer has been completed, the frame has been transmitted. So that is all you need to interpret in the microcontroller side or in the driver side, right? So I have shown you a picture. So the clock was basically, it remains in the idle state, and whenever there is a data that needs to be sent, it will start generating the clock. And in parallel, in the bottom side, you are also seeing that the data pin was also idle. Whenever the clock started, the data also started, starting with the start bit and then followed by 10 bits. Yeah.
So actually here start bit is okay, but I think why do we need this stop bit? Because we have fixed number of bits in the frame, so we can read up to 9th bit, sorry, or 10th bit. And
yes, so this is the protocol. That is how the PS2 protocol for the serial thing works, right? So that there is, if you want to start one more communication, there is a stop bit that is expected. So 0 is a start bit and 1 is a stop bit. That is how the protocol is designed, right? So we can sometimes there are certain frame structures in the protocol that is agreed upon. Okay, so sometimes it is due to historical reasons. So there is not always very strict logic about how the protocol bits are designed. So this is a standard that is being continued from a very long time, right? So we can always have whatever you said could be correct in certain scenarios, and there could be certain instances where I cannot give you a counter example right now, that in certain cases why a stop bit might be required. Okay, for example, even the parity bit might not be required. It's just for error correction, right? But these provisions are kept.
Okay, sir.
So from 0 to 7, this 8 bits is constituting 1 byte. Okay, and then you have the start and the stop in the beginning and in the end. So what our interest lies here is to detect the beginning of the key press. So what happens for the clock signal, as we see, so this is a snapshot that I have taken from one of the manuals that actually shows a feed in the oscilloscope whenever whenever key is pressed, right? So if you connect a scope to the clock pin, whenever a key is pressed, it is for the duration of those 11 bits, right? That during that frame, it is going to generate the clock pulse, right? And so this is basically the time that can trigger a pin change interrupt. So this was always high, and whenever the key press happened and it is going to do the transmission, the data transmission is happening for all in this frame, right? So this is the exact time when the PCINT interrupt will be raised, and whenever it is raised, all we want to do is we want to check for the 11 consecutive bits that are going to come, because this is already pre-decided that 11 bits are going to come and we need to read them one by one, right? Maybe the start parity bit and the stop bit doesn't make sense in our case, or it might not be required for deciphering the data. We are just showing you a very simple example. We will only care about this 8 bits from 0 to 7, right? But as a part of the protocol, we need to go through the entire frame to parse it correctly. Once you get all the 11 bits, then you can do our bit manipulation to just get the bits from 0 to 7, and the rest we can discard. Okay, so from our point of view, as I'll explain, is how to capture this particular thing in the ISR and process this data, process the data and basically compute the key, like which key is basically being pressed. So these were the pin connections. So with A4 we were connecting the clock, and with A3 we were connecting the data. So these are also shown in the figure here, and we also have connected the ground and the power. So if we remember, we were having this PC ICR, the pin change interrupt control register, where we want to mention which port we want to activate the interrupt for, or enable the interrupt for, which particular port we want to do that for. So if you see, most of these bits are not used. We are just using the last 3. So 0, 1 and 2, these bits are being used to configure the register, and in our case it will be a port number C. So we are just putting a value of 1 in this particular part of the byte. Okay, so the PC ICR is equal to that particular bit set to 1 is going to enable your ports. And then within that, we want to basically detect the pin change interrupt that is coming from the clock pulse, right? So the clock was idle, and then suddenly it changed the value. The value came down, and then there was a continuous train of clocks till the data transfer was taking place. But we need to register this particular event whenever this happened, right? And that this thing is the clock signal is, since it is connected to the pin A4, we want to unmask that particular pin, so that it is we can register the interrupt for that particular pin. Okay, so the PC mask register 1, so 0 is used for port B, 1 is used for port C, and I think 2 is used for port P. Okay, so this is a port C pin, so that particular pin is unmasked. That is all. So now the clock is there, and we also know the structure of the data, and we want to implement the interrupt service routine. Okay, so on the right hand side, I also show you a picture of the how the clock pulse will change, and maybe this is one instance of the particular clock. So sometimes it is on the high state, and then it flips back to the low state. And PCINT1 is basically the corresponding interrupt service routine that will be triggered if the pin change happens in port C, right? If it was port B, it will be PCINT0_fetch. Okay, so we will just declare a variable. We want to store the value of the particular character. If it is basically a byte, you can also use a byte. I did not pay much attention to those details. So the first thing that we want to write is a loop, right? So basically, we want to capture all the 11 bytes that are coming, 11 bits that are coming to the data pin, right? So data is basically connected to A3. Okay. So what should be done now is, since the clock has changed, right? So this is triggered. So the first thing we want to do is wait for the period of time till the flip happens, right? So in the first case, it will be false, so it will be for the first bit, because this is already flipped, right? So this will be immediately executed, and the while loop will exit. And then we have to also have another part of the clock when it is false, right? So if you compare that with any portion of the picture, right? So this is the part where it is true, and this is the part where this is false, and in between them we want to quickly go and read the data. So we are waiting for this time. This is a kind of a busy wait we are doing for waiting for the true state of the clock. This is the time we are waiting for the false state of the clock, and whenever this change happens, right, the true state expires, and then we are immediately going to go to the false state of the clock. Within that small period of time, we are going to utilize that time and read the value of the particular bit that is being present at the data pin at that point in time. So we can simply read. So you can just concentrate on this thing. We are reading the P in port, and we are basically reading A3. Okay, so this is a function that is implementing the data register for port number C, but for in, right? So we had the port C register and the PINC register. The port C register was basically meant for putting an output data, whereas the PINC register is meant for reading input data. And this is basically determined by the DDR register, data direction register, if you remember. The DDR register determines whether a particular port is being configured as an input port or an output port. So this is basically configured as an input port. We are trying to read the value in the microcontroller, which is coming from the external world. So we are reading the value of the bit which is coming from A3, and then as you see, we are going through this loop, right? And every time we want to save this value of this particular bit in the variable val. So what we are doing, we are depending on which instance of the clock is this. If it is the nth clock pulse, we are left shifting this particular bit by n positions, and then doing a logical OR with val. So at the end of the loop, whenever the loop has completed, we will get the entire bits of this 11 bits inside the variable VAL. Right? We can also use UINT16T. So all we care about is this only part is 0 to 7. In this case, we are not doing any error correction or anything, but yeah, for a more professionally written driver for a keyboard, people will care to do all those things. Okay, so we have to do one more shift because we want to flash out the start bit, and then we just do a and with FF, right? So 0x, so that we just basically take the 8 bits and don't care about anything else. And now this value is directly not going to give you some ASCII code. So this is something which is known as a scan code. This is just for your knowledge, and this scan code has to be passed to some kind of a table, right, which will give you the ASCII code for a particular key that you have pressed, whether it is A or whether it's 0, whether it is semicolon, right? So these characters will be mapped to a certain the ASCII codes, and the ASCII codes will be mapped to the scan code. So this conversion you can do. So that is a tedious task because these lookup tables are already available, and you can just use that lookup table as an array, and the array index could mean the scan code, right? So you can very easily implement that. Okay. So any questions with this implementation? We were just interested in trying to use this PCINT interrupt in the ISR. Okay. So the other thing that sometimes doesn't look serious, but it causes issues in introduces sometimes bugs inside the interrupt service routine. So what you need is, after the interrupt has been serviced, right? In certain cases, the hardware will clear the flag, but there are lots of instances, one including this, where you must you must clear the interrupt flag in software, right? So in this case, what we are doing is called serving the interrupt. Serving the interrupt. And why the interrupt happened? Because you have originally set the interrupt using the PC ICR and the PC mask registers, right? You have already specified to the system that you are going to raise an interrupt in the port C, and you have mentioned in which particular pin you are trying to put this mask, and here you have serviced the interrupt when that particular thing happened. But after that, right, you need to basically go to another register called this PCIFR, which is the interrupt flag register, where you need to clear it using software. So this is something I have actually taken up because there was a very clear explanation of this in this web page. So I have put the web page here also, you can look it up. So they also, it's mentioned in the manual that you need to clear it using software. So what they say is that we must clear the interrupt bit flag before we leave the ISR, or it might remain stuck there, right? And this practice is known as acknowledging the interrupt. Whenever you are done with the interrupt, you have served the interrupt, please clear the interrupt flag register. Okay, so you can just simply write one to that particular bit, which is going to clear that interrupt flag. So in this case, we are trying to write 1 for port C. So this will be set as 1, that PCIF1. So this entire byte will become 2, right? All zeros followed by a 1 and 0 in the end. So the PCIFR is equal to 0x02. So this is a practice that you should do, and while reading the manual also keep that in mind, how the interrupt flag is being cleared, whether the hardware is clearing that automatically, or you need to manually do it in software, right? The software will be responsible to clear the interrupt flag. So keep this in mind. Okay, so now we will look at another flavor of this. This is whatever we have done is still a digital interfacing. We are trying to use something like a serial bus, and using the PS2 interface, we were transporting data from one device to the microcontroller. And more popular digital sensors use like popular buses or popular interfaces, and of them we are going to cover these two for sure in the course. So one is called the SPI, which is the serial peripheral interface, and then there is this I2C, which is basically built upon what the AVR calls the two-wire interface, TWI, right? So there are certain changes on top of TWI that implements this I2C. So today we'll cover mostly this, and we will sometime we will basically also look at this I2C, right? It could be before the exam or maybe after. We'll see how we can manage. Okay, so as you know that we dealt with basically two types of sensors. One was the first we dealt with the analog sensors, where we always had a value to sample, and it is up to the computer is how fast you can sample, and what was the resolution of your amplitude that you are sampling. So if you remember in the quantization lectures, right, uh, we were trying to deal with this problem both in time, how fast you are getting the samples, right? Because this is a fully continuous signal, both in the temporal domain as well as in the voltage or the amplitude domain. So how you are discretizing the signal in the amplitude domain using the ADC, and it is also sampling the signal using, if you remember, the sample and hold. So it is going to sample and hold the signal for certain amount of time, and that will somehow determine that, added with the time to convert the signal to digital form, will determine how fast you can read the data from the analog sensor, right? So if you remember, we are using a pre-scalar value to configure the analog, to configure the ADC, the maximum rate it can sample the digital values. Okay, sample the analog values. So here this is one option. If it is an analog sensor, the ADC could be resident inside the microcontroller, and sometimes it happens the ADC is not present inside the microcontroller or the board that you are talking about. So in that case, you have to provide an ADC externally, right? Raspberry Pi, for example, will not have an onboard ADC. So if you are trying to give an analog signal to it, you have to basically convert it into digital form and then send it to the GPIO pins. Okay. And the other thing that we are going to talk about are digital sensors, where it is already converting the data in a digital format, right? If you already have 8-bit data or 16-bit data, right? Let's say it's a temperature sensor and you are having 16-bit temperature sample, right? Using a certain resolution or certain maximum minimum range and also on, right? And all these digital sensors are a little bit smarter. You can configure those sensors. The microcontroller could talk to the sensors. You can request data in a certain format and so on. And this is called the data bus, or you can call it the digital bus, which is going to have both data and control, right? So as I told you, that to control the flow of data in between a microcontroller and the digital device, in this case this is a sensor, there will be certain things that has to be agreed upon, right? How fast the data is going to be sent out, or how fast the data is going to be read, what kind of data it is expecting. If your sensor is capable of giving you multiple types of data, what data the device has to request, right? So all those things happen sometimes through control, or even we can set control messages as a part of data also, right? So these things we will discuss. And on the top we are showing two sensors which are basically digital sensors. One of them is using an I2C bus, another one is using SPI bus, right? And why different kinds of technologies, there are different kinds of interfaces. This is also due to historical reason. Different companies, Motorola or Intel or Philips Semiconductor, like NXP, right, they came up with different kinds of these protocols because of their own devices, right? And later they got standardized, right? There could be many more protocols, but these two attracted the attention of the semiconductor, like manufacturers of the microcontrollers, and they adopted these protocols in their system. And subsequently the market sort of determined, like the sensor manufacturers, they had to obey those norms, right? Because those are the interfaces that are already available in the majority of the microcontrollers. So better to have those interfaces in the sensors, right? So that their applicability increases. So, and they have of course pros and cons, right? Some are better for a given purpose and some are better for some other purpose, like data rates, power, and so on. So for the serial peripheral interface, we basically have these four pins, right, through which a sensor device talks to the microcontroller. And so there is, of course, a clock that is required for the synchronization and the timing. So there is a clock that is required, and then there is something called data in, and there is something called data out. Okay, so if the microcontroller wishes to send data out to the sensing device, to the sensor, let's say it wants to configure certain parameters to inside the sensor, it can send data out, and that will be basically SDI in case of the sensing device, because it's just the opposite, right? Whatever data is being sent out will be sent in the device, and the other way around. Whatever the sensor device sends, if it is a sensing, sending the readings out, it is going to send it out through the SDO interface, and that is going to be entering the microcontroller through the SDI, the data in pin. Okay, and then there is one control for chip select, right? So what is chip select? If you have multiple devices like this, right? If you have this is one sensor one, this is sensor two, this is sensor three. In those cases, you have to select a particular sensor and get the data out of it, or send data, communicate with a particular sensor. So for that, the microcontroller can use this particular thing called chip select, based on which it can select a given sensor. Okay, and this is often a master slave kind of a configuration, where the microcontroller is the master and which controls a lot of slave devices, and these are the individual sensors. Okay, so this is how the most simple configuration works, right? You can have different protocols might even allow multiple masters, but that is not the main purpose, right? Here, the most common way we interface is like having a single microcontroller master, and then having a lots of sensors which could be basically slave devices, and all of them will have these inputs, the clock, data in and data out. So this is called, the SDI is basically master in serial out. So this is SDI for the microcontroller. So this is master in. So if the data is being input inside the microcontroller, so this master in and slave out, and this MOSI is basically master out and slave in. Okay, so these are the common short forms, and in many of the chips you will find some variations of this, right? For example, SCK sometimes is written as SCL. You can find like a SPI clock, or even you will see SCLK and so on, right? So some variation of these things, right? And same for MOSI, MISO. Sometimes you will find things like SDI, SDO, and so on. Okay. So this is the interfaces that the divisions inside the interface that we have for the SPI bus, and we basically have two shift registers, right, in the sensor and the microcontroller. So on the left hand side we have the microcontroller as the master device, whereas the sensor on the right hand side, and we have two shift registers that basically stores the data, and we'll see how the data is transferred. So if you shift the data towards the right hand side on the master, it is basically going to be output through the MOSI pin, and this is basically master out, and the data is basically sieved inside the sensors shift register. So if you see A, B, C, and D has already entered the shift register of the sensor, whereas E is going to come now, right, followed by F, G, and H. Okay, and we can also do it the other way around, which is like this. If the shift happens from the sensor side, that if you have all the data on the sensor side, and then we start doing a right shift here, so this is going to come out from the master in slave out interface here. Okay, and is going to be populated in the shift register in the microcontroller master. So this is how the sensor can send the data, and the data can be populated uh, inside the register of the microcontroller. Okay, and of course the shift register has to operate using the same clock. So in this SPI protocol, the clock is being generated in the microcontroller master, and that is shared with the uh, sensor device, right? The sensor device will take the clock from the microcontroller, and then that same clock will be used to transfer the data in between the two shift registers. And then of course you will have the chip select or chip enable thing, which can be programmed to select a particular device or a particular sensor. Okay, and then there are certain nuances in every protocol. In this protocol, there are two things that have to be kept in mind for configuring the clock, and there is something known as clock phase and clock polarity. So this is very specific to SPI protocol. This is not very fundamental that it will be required for all kinds of other protocols, not the case, but just for the sake of completeness I want to mention this. So this is very simple. For clock polarity, there are only two options. If the base of the clock is kept at low, so let's say this is the low, logic low, then it is called the clock polarity is 0, right? So ideally, if it is kept in the low state, the clock polarity we call is 0. Whereas if it is kept at high, so this is known as the clock polarity is high. So whenever the clock starts, it will go from high to low and then low to high. Whereas it is reversed in case of clock polarity is equal to 0 case. And then there is one more thing called clock phase, which again could be 0 or 1. So what happens in clock phase 0, the data will be starting in sync with the, or I would say the raising edge or the rising edge of the clock. So the data will start exactly from here. I would say the rising part of the edge of the clock. Whereas if you keep the clock phase is equal to 1, there will be one clock delay, and then it is going to be started on and the trailing edge of the clock. Okay, so this is basically trailing. So this will not be that useful in our programming context. Wherever you want to program a certain SPI bus for talking to a sensor, if we know that if there is already an agreed upon polarity that your sensor is going to support, we have to use that particular thing. But the SPI protocol supports these multiple kinds of configurations, right? And so this is a block diagram for the registers. We have already done registers, studied registers about ADC. So as we know, all the different peripheral devices, starting from counters, timers, ADC, analog comparator, everything will have some control registers that will configure that particular peripheral or device. So in this case also, if you don't have to look at the entire picture, please look into the three red blocks, right? On the top, we have the 8-bit shift register. So that is a physical register that resides in your microcontroller hardware. And then there are two registers. One is called the status register and the other one is called the control register. Okay, so these are the three registers that is responsible for your SPI operation. Okay, and these actually exist inside your microcontroller, and there are certain pins that are pre-configured to serve the MISO, MOSI chip select functionalities. Okay, and like any other peripheral, you have a crystal input that goes through a prescaler, and the prescaler, as you see, can be chosen, and that will go to the SPI clock master. Right, so there is a clock logic, and this clock is going to determine how fast the data is going to go in or go out, right? The shift register is basically controlled by this clock. So how frequently the shift is going to happen will be controlled by this clock. Okay, so the read data buffer is going to pick the data up from the data bus, transport that particular data in the shift register, and then if you are doing a transmit operation, the data will be shifted and the data is going to go out of the master out slave in, if this is a microcontroller, right? And the SPI control register has a lot of purposes. how you are configuring that particular device. So like all other like ADC you have to enable, right? You had that ADEN. So in this case also you have to enable the SPI bus, right? Then there is a bit for whether it is being enabled as a master or a slave. So MSTR is going to do that. So this one we have already seen. This is for the clock polarity and the clock phase, not very important in our context. And then there is this prescaler. So this is the prescaler, and this prescaler is sort of weird because it is divided into in between two registers. So these are the 2 bits, and there is one more bit, and they call it sort of a SPI bus speed doubler, right? Because that is how if you put a 1 on before this particular bit combination, it is going to double the value, right? So that's why it has this name called SPI2X. But basically your prescaler is determined by SPI2X is the most significant bit, then SPR1, and then SPR0. So this is going to determine what is the clock that is being fed to the SPI bus, right, for the data transfer. And then we have the data register. We have already spoken about it. The data register, you have to write the data to the data register, and it could be transmitted, or it could be the other way around, right? If it is a reception, the data will be populated inside the data register. It's called SPDR. Okay. And the status register, we have already looked at. This is the speed doubler, and then this is something that we will use. This is basically the SPI interrupt flag, and this is SPI interrupt enable, right? Whatever thing happens, right? If the data transport has been completed, right? So it was shifting the data, and let's say all the 8 bits have been shifted to either the master or the slave. It is going to raise an interrupt after that, indicating that your data transfer operation has finished. So you have to go and serve a particular interrupt, right? So you can enable those interrupts using the SPIE flag, and SPIF is basically the interrupt flag which can be cleared. Okay. So this is the prescaler configuration. The manual, it is directly from the manual, but what you need to keep in mind is that whenever you are dealing with peripherals, you have to have this prescaler in mind, right? That's why I am trying to repeat it, although this particular specific example is not very important. But if you even deal with like, let's say, some other kind of peripherals, keep this in mind, or try to check in the manual what kind of frequencies are supported and so on, right? It could be that in case of the ADC, right, there are many valid peripherals that we can use, but a certain peripheral is going to bump up the ADC clock so high that that particular clock rate is not supported in the ADC. That can also happen. So just putting a random value is not going to work in our case, right? We have to check through the particular device's configuration, that what are legitimate configurations for configuring that particular sensor device or a peripheral. So these are the pins. So if you see, if you try to tally it with the Arduino, this pin number 13, 12, 11, and 10, which is in port B, are responsible for the SPI operations. Okay. And these 4 pins are controlled basically through the port B registers, right? In this case, this is the port B data register, or the port B data direction register, which from here I can basically know the pin numbers, right? Or the offsets in the these registers, how to configure this particular pins 13, 12, 11, and 10. So as you see, these 4 bits are sort of needed in our business wherever you want to deal with the SPI bus, right? You have to access port B, and within port B you have to access these 4 bits, right, which will be needed for SPI operations. So it's a very simple example I will give you. One is a send and one is the receive. So this is a send, and we want to basically send 1 byte data, right? It's as a character 1 byte. So byte data is the value that I am going to send. So initialization has to be done. So this is the DDRB, the data detection register, and what will be the data detection? This will be outside, right? It will be data out because the master is sending the data out to the slave device or the sensor, right? And this MOSI and SCK, as we saw here, these are the corresponding bit offsets. So we have to use this particular values of 5 and 7. And what we are doing, we are basically setting the DDRB register so that those two pins are set as output, right? The clock and the master out serial in. Then port B, we are basically doing the chip select, right? So this SS I have not defined, but like you can, from here you can very easily figure out what is the value of SS, right? Okay, so you can just use that particular value as which bit, right? And then determine that you have to use that to turn on the particular slave device or select the particular slave device. And then we have for the control register, so this is the control register, right? Here, so there are three things we have to do. So one is selecting the prescaler, right? In this case, we are just using the SPR0 to be 1, and then rest of it is left as 0. So we have not touched this particular bit. We have not touched this particular bit, but we are just changing the value here. Okay, and the other thing is that we are touching this particular bit, declaring that we are using it as a master device, and then we are also doing a enabling of the SPI bus, right? So these are the things that we have written to this control register. And then what we do is we basically write the particular data to the SPDR register, which is the data register, this one. And then we basically wait. Once you put the data and then it is configured in the master mode, and it is going to send the data out, and it is, if you see that MOSI pin is basically set, right? So this is going to send the data out, and we are going to do a busy wait, waiting for the interrupt flag to be cleared, right, by the SPIF, right? Whenever it is done, we can know that the data has been sent out. Okay, so this is a very simple example just to show you that how can you have very low level access to the SPI hardware that is already present in the microcontroller, and you can write your very simple like byte transfer program from one device to the other device. If you want to send configure one Arduino, let's say, as a master device, and the other one is a slave device, and you can try to run something like this to just send one character out from the master to the slave, and you can display it to the inside the slave device. And this is another example, just the opposite. We are trying to receive a byte. So this is SPI master receive, and then instead of using the MOSI, we are now using the MISO pin, right? And instead of setting it as 1, we have to basically set it as 0, because if you remember, the DDRB is if it is input, it has to be set as 0, whereas if it is output, it has to be set as 1. So that's why we could have just written that particular bit as 0, but this is for the demonstration purpose, that 1 and then left shift by the MISO whatever bit it corresponds to, and then we are negating it. Okay, and similarly we are doing a chip select because we are the master, and the master has to select the particular device. This is the enabling the SPI interface. And for reception, what is done is it could vary from device to device, like the sensor to sensor. If you write, let's say, FF, and then after you wait for the IF flag to be cleared, the data will be available in the data register. Okay, so you just write, you can even write 0 0. So it actually depends on the kind of device that you are interfacing and the specifics of the driver. So you can write a particular value and just wait for the interrupt, because unless and until you write the data to the data register, it is not going to do the shifting operation, right? Once you write the data, depending on whether it's an input or output, it is going to populate a particular register, populate the data register with the received data, right? If the sensor is sending some data to the SPI master or the microcontroller, the sensor's readings will be available in the SPDR register. Okay, so here, as I was telling you, that it could be a little bit more sophisticated sensor, for example, like accelerometer sensor or something like a GPS. They will also have registers inside them, and that needs to be configured, right? So one way this is achieved is you basically send an address, right? If you want to write or even read from a certain register inside the device, you can send the address, and then you can actually send the data that you need to write at that address or read from that address. Okay, so this is still the slave device, and from the microcontroller, you are basically, from the data sheet, you know that suppose you want to increase the resolution of your acceleration readings, right? For that, you need to write a certain thing in the R1 register. So what you will do, you know the address of the R1 register, and you know what data to write. So you basically use the SPI bus to write these 2 bytes. Okay, and similarly for reading. And as a part of the protocol, there are certain things that you need to do. So the first thing is that you need to basically put the chip enable as 0. So this always marks the start of the write cycle. So this is the start, and in the end you have to make the chip enable is equal to 1, which is basically the end of the write cycle. Okay, so whenever it is done, you will basically raise it to high. So this is the end. If you are reading or writing, doesn't matter. And what you do in the beginning is that 8-bit address you feed first to the system, and the A7, this particular the significant bit here will be 0 or 1 depending on whether you are reading or writing. So I have given 2 examples. One is a read and another one is a write. So it will either be 0 or 1 depending on what you are trying to do in the next byte, whether the next byte will be read from the sensor or the next byte will be written to the sensor. And you are basically requesting using a certain address that you are sending out through the SPI bus. Okay, so first the address is fed, and next for the data, right? The next is you are depending on the value of A7, the microcontroller writes or reads the data belonging to that particular address location immediately. And what you can do is you can use for Arduino, you don't have to write a lot of code like this. This is already abstracted out in some of these libraries. So the spi.h is the library like the header file that has access to all these different functionalities I just spoke about, right? So this can be a prescaler. This is going to start the SPI interface, enable all the interrupts and so on. This is going to enable the interrupt using interrupt. So all the configurations can be done using these APIs, right? You can begin a transaction, end a transaction. You can transfer a certain byte. You can transfer 2 bytes using the transfer 16 function and so on. And so this support library exists. Okay, and the idea for you is to know the underlying details of the library, so that if you want to just need something very specific to your sensor, right, not have a general purpose functionality, then you can reduce the size of your code. Okay, so I'll give you a typical application flow, how it might actually work in a real Arduino sketch, and then we'll wrap up for today, right? So first is in the setup, we are doing 2 things. We are beginning the SPI interface called spi.begin, and then the chip select pin or the chip enable pin, that particular pin is to be set as output, because as you saw that CE is controlling, the chip select pin is controlling the selection of the slave devices. And then there is a certain set of register writes which are basically trying to typically configuration or control, right? So we are trying to write some data through the SPI bus to the device one time, and often these are used for tweaking certain configuration or changes inside how you are going to read that data, or whether you are using a particular feature inside the sensor or not. That is how it is achieved. And then there is a loop where you are continuously going to read the data out of the different registers, right? Suppose you want to read like acceleration data, or a magnetometer is like a compass data, right? So in those cases, there will be different registers where you are going to read this data from, and for that you are just going to request using this address, and this will be in the reading mode. It is going to read the master is going to read the data, and then immediately the SPDR register will be populated by the sensors reading, right? And you have to, in your program control, you have to read the data and copy it in your local variables. So only two things I'm going to discuss here. So how the write register could be implemented. So there are two things. One is the register address. So this is the special register that you are inside the sensor that you are going to talk to, and then you are trying to write a value, right? In this case, this is a byte. Let's say the register only has 8 bits, and you are trying to write this particular value. So there is a data to send that you are starting with, and the data to send basically has one address component, and then requesting that particular device or instructing the particular device whether you want to perform a read operation or a write operation, right? So this particular bit, right, maybe this a 0, right? So this 0 could be 1 or 0 depending on the sensor's implementation. So here we are saying that the single bit, right? I think the in the figure we have to see what for the write we are using 1, right? So in this case also it has to be set to 1. Okay, so and but it depends on the nomenclature of your device, right? So there could be certain other bits that might be required to be enabled in order to request the particular sensor to send data or accept data from my side. Okay, so you are basically making this particular pin low because this is the start of the write cycle, and these are the two main things that you want to do: SPI transfer data to send, and immediately after that you basically transfer the val. So what the sensor will do, depending on like how the sensor has specified that in their manual, that that val will be copied to that particular register having that register address as register add, right? This one is the address of the register. So once you send the value val, it is immediately going to copy that value to the particular register inside the sensor, and then you are done. So you are basically making the chip select pin high. Okay, so this is transporting the value, the 1 byte, to be written in a register inside the sensor. Okay, so this is a very common thing for changing certain configurations in a sensor. You will need it for many sensors will have this kind of an functionality need. And the other one is for register read. There is no difference absolutely here. So just that it could be flipped. So the last one, if it's the A7 was 0, this will be just A7 will be 0 to in this case, whereas it was 1 in the other case, right? This could be 0, and then nothing changes apart from this. Okay, so what we will do here is we are going to, the first part is still the same, SPI.transfer data to send. This is going to send the address, right? And this has already told the sensing device that whether you want to do a read operation or a write operation. Okay, depending on the value that has been set, depending on the configuration or the manual of the sensor, you have already know what is the bit configuration needed if you want to read something from the sensor, right? And if it is already instructed to send, just after this thing has finished, it will start transferring the data. So what you have to do is that you can do a SPI.transfer FF or 00 or whatever is instructed for that particular sensor, and the sensor is immediately going to do the transfer operation of its own contents of its the data register, which is going to be populated in the data register of the microcontroller. Okay, so this is going to be returned by this particular function, right? The library implementation is actually reading your SPDR register, and you can return this particular reading, right? That is how you can read it out. Okay, so this is the last thing that I want to show you, how this particular library is organized or how the code actually flows. So this is your particularly the microcontroller hardware, right? And this basically forms the entire piece that I was showing you today, right? One is the Arduino library, in this case this SPI.h library, which talks to the low level registers, right? This AVR firmware will have the mappings to different ports, which pin is in a certain particular port, and the different bookkeepings that needs to be done for the enabling a particular clock, controlling the data rate, prescaler, and so on. That will be all done at the firmware level. And then there are certain mix in between these two, right? Some of the things could be all done inside the library while bypassing the firmware functionalities, but yeah, there is a certain boundary, right? How much the library is supposed to do and how much the existing AVR firmware is supposed to do, which is a part of the like the software abstraction of this underlying hardware. Okay, so this firmware is sometimes generic, and it is the library that you are writing could be specific to a certain platform. And you might have a sensor library. Suppose you have bought a certain sensor, it could be a temperature sensor, it could be a pressure sensor, and that particular vendor is going to give you certain APIs, and those APIs will be written on top of the libraries, right? And what you end up using are these APIs, right? And given an example, right? Suppose you have a sensor class that they are going to provide you. So it's a C++ code. You can write sensor mySense. This is the object that you will create, and then you can keep on treating a particular sensor as an object, right? That much of abstraction this kind of code can give you. Okay, and all the things that are happening underlying is what you have experienced right now. There are so many nitty-gritty details, right, to transfer one byte. Okay, but it's better to know how this entire thing works, so that at least one example you should go through the protocol in and out through the manuals or from the book. Even you can look at it, right, so that you have a clear-cut idea about what exactly the library is doing or what the sensor library is doing, right? Because there are often inefficiencies here. So in extreme cases, you might have to bump up the data rate, or certain things are not implemented in the API, right? Sometimes you will see that the hardware, the sensing hardware, for example, will support certain kind of activity, right? Certain feature is present, but that particular API is absent. And that should not be the reason that is stopping you to not use that particular feature. In that case, you have to basically write your own API on top of that SPI library, right? Or even in the SPI library itself, there could be a certain feature you want, right, that is missing, right, in a particular, because there are many libraries, there are many third-party things that are available these days, right? So once you try to adopt a certain third-party library in your code, you need to understand if there are any existing inefficiencies that are happening, right? And of course, these things come into the picture only when you are pushing your application performance limits, right? You want to get as much efficiency as possible in terms of reading the data out, or how many samples per second you want to read data from the sensor, and so on, right? So this is about the SPI interface, and we won't have anything more than whatever I taught right now in the examination. And so next class we will try to see, right, whether we want to start something new, or we will basically go over the I2C protocol. So we'll see what best suits us.